Welcome back to the podcast. So this is the Cognition Podcast. We are really privileged to have a special guest here today. He's a very good friend of mine, and I really got to know him as a player when he was with Toronto Maple Leafs, because he really has a really unique name for me. Corrado is something that it just has a really nice ring to it. So I've always been a big fan of Frankie. So welcome to the podcast, Frankie. Really honored to have you on today.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, it's nice to catch up. I know we were so used to seeing each other so often, doing work in the garage. So it's nice to catch up today.
Yeah, everything's been great with you in last, because I know you've had a bit of a transition with your career, right?
It's been good, man. Yeah, it's been interesting. I think, you do a lot of work when you're playing hockey as far as trying to perfect your craft. And, there's a lot of physical and mental that comes with that. And now, with what I'm doing now, speaking in front of a camera or a microphone, it still feels like there's a lot of that mental aspect where you really need to be dialed in and thinking clearly. And so I think a lot of the work that we did, a lot of those lessons kind of carried over now into my next career.
Yeah, that's good. And I guess your schedule is pretty crazy now too, right? With
schedule's busy. Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate. I'm probably doing something at least 5 days a week, and that's a mixture between radio and TV, and some stuff is maybe a little longer format, some stuff a little shorter, but it's nice to get all those different reps and see what you like and see what you kind of thrive at a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's great, especially kind of combining your passions and your background and your experience, and now you're bringing that to the forefront and kind of sharing that with a lot of people. That's fantastic.
Yeah, you know what, like for me, it's talking hockey, and I feel like I have a pretty unique perspective on things. The fact that I did play, but some of my, I guess, misfortunes along the way offer some unique perspective, and so I can always touch on that. And even the fact just, being around the game for so long and watching games, playing games, the countless meetings and one-on-one video sessions, team video sessions, I just try and, figure out how I can bring those to the audience in a good way, in an informative way, and in a fun way as well.
When are we going to see you play the guitar on one of
I don't know. Things would have to go pretty off the rails for you to see me with the guitar.
There's that viral video of you playing, what was that now? I don't remember.
It probably would have been, I think the Leafs, when I was playing for them, did a little, like a day in the life, so they came by the house.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Played a little guitar there.
Really happy to have you on, because I know we worked together for a couple of years, and obviously you having been in the league for a long time, you kind of got to see that transition, kind of over the years with respect to the way that the game is changing. What kind of inspired you to come work with me here, like from a cognitive perspective?
You know what, it was interesting. I've obviously seen, I guess I had seen your Instagram account and saw what you were doing, and I got to the point where I realized like I couldn't necessarily just rely on my feet anymore out there. Like I needed to start finding an advantage out there, and for me, like I had just had a ton of injuries, and I was looking for something else, something different that could help me get by. And coming to work with you was great, because it was a lot of fast thinking on your toes, and a lot of reaction stuff. And I found that when I went and played that year in Sweden, maybe if it wasn't right away, but eventually I kind of felt that the game was slowing down for me, and I was able to read and react a little better, make some better decisions, and I almost felt like I wasn't overexerting myself to do so. A lot of times when people like to say, well, let the game come to you, you can sit around and wait, and it may not happen for you. But I feel like when you've done that kind of work and kind of pushed your brain to certain areas, letting the game come to you actually is an advantage. And I remember like we would do 2-hour sessions in your garage, and I would leave those just feeling really mentally exhausted, right? Like really exerted. And I remember we'd be getting to an hour 30, an hour 45, and I'd be telling you, I only have a couple left. I feel like my brain's turning into scrambled eggs here, but it's great. It was a great mental workout, and for me, I could definitely feel a difference in my game. I just felt more confident out there. And I explain it this way: like a lot of players have this internal clock that's going. When you have the puck. And for players who are a little more with it mentally, that clock moves a little slower. And for the players that maybe aren't so sure or aren't so confident, that clock seems like a ticking time bomb, and you see the difference in that kind of player. And I think for me, after doing stuff with you, I felt like that clock was slowing down for me. I felt like I could welcome a forecheck. I'm a defenseman, right? So I felt like I could welcome a forecheck just a second longer and not feel worried or panicked to make a play under pressure. It was definitely something that I felt gave me an advantage.
A lot has changed since you've been here as well, but the core is pretty much the same, that we want you to, especially as a defenseman, you want to be seeing the entire ice from edge to edge and seeing what's coming, but also at the same time seeing where your next opportunity could be, whether it be a stretch pass or a guy sitting at the line or something waiting.
Well, that was the thing too, right? Like we would do things and you would say, well, your left eye isn't necessarily seeing this part as much, and then we would work on that, and that was something that carried over as well, because let's say I was a defenseman and I would always just kind of look at one side of the ice because that was my default side and that's where I felt comfortable. But the more we did those drills where you kind of push yourself to see the areas where you don't necessarily see so well or it doesn't come so naturally, it opens up a whole chunk of ice for you that you may not have noticed before, or you only would have noticed if your body was facing a certain way. So I think the whole vision and sight aspect plays a big part in that as well.
And then you went to Sweden right after that, and obviously with the larger ice surface as well, you have to play a little bit differently, right?
Yeah, it was interesting there. Like, I know there's a lot of talk about the larger ice surface and having more time. Sweden probably doesn't embody that having more time philosophy, because the way they play hockey, it's a lot of run and gun, in your face hockey. Like, the way I described it is there's not a lot of freebies out there for you. Like, everything's under pressure. You always have to problem solve out there. It was a little bit of an eye opener for me, because I probably thought I was going to have a little more time, and then when you get there, you're thinking, okay, like I'm under the gun a lot. So the foundation and the base that we did definitely helped me with that.
And obviously, like you've been playing prior to that for a very long time. Like it was probably close to 20 years. Is that?
Yeah, like I would have started playing hockey around 6 or 7 years old, and right. By the time I came to see you, I was 27 or 28.
How long were you in kind of like in that pro?
Yeah, so I was drafted in 2011 at age 18 to Vancouver, and then I would have turned pro at age 20, and I'm done now, so I'm 29. So, about a 10-year career and almost 4 years in the NHL and a bunch of years in the American Hockey League, a couple years in Europe. So it's quite a vast experience of hockey, for sure.
What are some of the more memorable moments for you, like in your hockey career?
Well, you know what, you have little checkpoints along the way, right? So you kind of look back at those, and if you start with getting drafted to the OHL and playing your first OHL game, first OHL goal, and then getting drafted to the NHL, and first NHL game, first NHL goal, and playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs is something that sticks out. Playing my first game at home with the Maple Leaf on my sweater was really, really cool. And there's other little things that happen along the way, like I played a few games for the Pittsburgh Penguins, so that means I was a teammate with Sidney Crosby, which was really, really cool to see him up close and personal, and even on practice days, and to see how hard he pushes himself and what a great leader he is. So I'm pretty fortunate to have had some pretty cool experiences along the way.
Within that 10-year kind of a career as a pro, you got to see some of that transition happening as well, right? From kind of moving from more of a physical play to now I got to think strategically a little bit more and make the right plays and such. Like how did you see that?
You know what, I think there's just more smart players now. I think before, like when I first started, if there was a couple guys who thought the game a little better, you could really notice them. There was a lot of guys who maybe just played a very simple, basic kind of game, and just now there's a lot of smart players. But it's interesting too, because when I say that there's a lot of smart players, there's a lot of crafty players, there's a lot of players that are good at problem solving. Something that I think gets lost along the way is, managing the game. And guys talk about it with football all the time, right? Like certain quarterbacks, they're game managers, and fans may not love those guys because they're not the most exciting brand of players, but coaches and teams, those guys seem to get results. The guys that manage the game, and at the end of the night, they've given their team a chance to win. That's the one thing that I think has kind of fallen by the wayside with all the incredible skill and speed that we see in the game now. But as far as players' individual skill goes, there's a ton of it out there. There's guys looking to make plays that might not have been made 10 years ago as often. So there's, this next wave of player, we're seeing it now where a forward comes into the league and he doesn't have to be 6'1" at least and 200 pounds in order to play on the third and fourth line. You can be a smaller, speedier guy, make some crafty plays, chip in offensively, and you can get by in the NHL now. So there's quite a shift that's happened, and we're seeing it in the game where we're seeing these highly skilled, really fast, smart players that are making really, really nice plays out there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did I just did like a poll the other day on Instagram just to kind of get people's feedback and kind of asking about what's their biggest struggle this season, right? And I think the largest percentage of the respondents basically said I'm just not making smart plays. Right. So they work really hard, they skate fast, they shoot hard, they're doing all the stuff that is kind of the normal convention. But when it comes to, hey, I need to make some better quality plays, that's where it kind of starts to fall off, right?
And that's especially if you're a defenseman, your whole game is basically making reads, right? Like, and coaches talk about it all the time. We made good reads, we made bad reads out there. That's most of your game as a defenseman, and it's understanding, what the game calls for, like where's your support, can you pinch, do you have to lay back, do you put pressure in that spot on the ice, do you lay off, where's your stick? And, that's just a few of them. There's so many more in a game that happen, and that's just away from the puck. There's so many more with the puck as well. Can I get this shot from the point through? Do I have to maybe put it down into the corner? Do I maybe use a bank shot off the end boards? And all these things are happening in such a split second. So, you're trying to process all these decisions in such a small amount of time. It's definitely challenging, and you see the guys who play in the NHL for a long time, it just feels like they're the guys that make it look fairly easy out there. They never look like they're under too much duress, or they don't make the game very hard on themselves. And it's not that the game is easier for them. They're playing the same game as everyone else. They're processing things at a much higher rate, and they're able to play much more efficiently because of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think even when I was a lot younger, and I'd be watching a couple games where a defenseman would go wide, right? They would shoot wide, but they're actually playing a bank shot, right? So, I used to think, why are they missing the net all the time? But that's actually the play, right? That they're looking to do, right? So
yeah, exactly. I think that's what Nick Lidstrom made that pretty mainstream, especially playing at the Joe Louis Arena with the they had really lively end boards there. And and the thing is, the longer you play with teammates, forwards are going to know that that's something you might do. So if they can read it, they'll kind of react off that for you.
It's interesting too because I was watching an interview with Marty St. Louis. I think it was after one of the practices the other day, and he was just talking about how he wanted his guys to force the other team to make a mistake. Like even if they're on a power play, they want the PK, the opposing PK team to make a mistake, and that's what they're counting on.
That's just being proactive too, right? Like there's some teams that'll kind of sit back and wait and play this conservative style of hockey, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like it'll find a way to get you results. But the thing is with these skilled players the way they are now, you want to give them a lot of time and space with the puck. Eventually you're gonna get burned, and so the more you can kind of force guys into a corner, force guys into one spot on the ice and make them make mistakes, they will, because everyone wants to make plays. Everyone wants to make a nice tape-to-tape pass. Everyone wants to thread it under a stick, and the more pressure you're under when you're trying to do that, the more chance you have of making a mistake, and teams will kind of feed into that as far as their transition game.
It's almost like golf, right? Like you want to play kind of a course management type of a golf game where you kind of looking at where you need to be and then work backwards.
That's it. You just give yourself good positions eventually to score in golf, right? Hit a fairway and then aim for the middle of the green, and then once you get that chance and you're on a par 5 and you're 170 yards out on your second shot, you go for it. You start just kind of rolling that over, and that's what we see the great golfers do.
And who in your mind would you say is like one of the smartest players? I mean, obviously you've seen enough games and played in a lot of games, but who would you, in your opinion, I mean, even let's say in today's game, like in 2022, right?
I mean, last night Patrice Bergeron got his 1,000th point, and I don't even need to look any further than him. He's so smart. You know, he's won Selke after Selke, and he's been a big offensive guy as well, and he's won championships. And, you know, I've played against him a little bit during my time in the league, and you know, he's one of those guys, he's just always seems to have a stick on you, and if he doesn't, he's kind of just in the right spot where he picks off a pass, and he's really good away from the puck. I mean, like, that's a guy who thinks the game at a really high level. And, you know, so I was watching Toronto play Boston a couple weeks back, and there's a play where Bergeron is kind of engaged with a guy in a little bit of a box out situation, and the puck goes back to the point, and it's Toronto's offense, Boston's defense, so Bergeron's in his own zone. And he kind of sees that his winger cornered Toronto's defenseman onto the side of the board, so he has nowhere else to put the puck except down low. So a lot of players, myself included, would stay with their box out because it's man-on-man coverage down low and kind of get really engaged in that. As soon as Bergeron saw that the Toronto player had nowhere else to go except down the wall, he immediately gets off of his battle and goes and picks off that puck, and Boston's going the other way. And it seems like it would be such a routine thing that everyone does, but it really isn't, because when you're engaged in that kind of battle, that's all you're thinking about. But he had the presence of mind to kind of be watching his guy engaged in a battle, look up, see that his player forced Toronto's defenseman into, you know, a no-win situation, and he picks off the puck. And so, you know, if you do that a few times a night, now instead of Toronto playing offense on you, you're playing offense, you're transitioning on them. So those are the little things that make a big difference throughout the course of a hockey game.
Yeah, I've seen so many like really good play. I mean, they're not even plays, right? It's just like common sense for me. When you're a forward line and you see your F1 and you clearly know that you're the F2, but you're not necessarily going to where an F2 needs to be to kind of, you know, trap that other opponent or support that F1. And so I've been really trying to promote, especially if you're a forward, to know what your role is, whether you're F1, F2, or F3. Because once they start to realize that, they go, oh, like all of a sudden, like this cloud like goes away, right? And now they realize what the roles are.
It really is up to whoever's teaching the players too, because, you know, I find people like to use these hockey terms like you just used, right? You say F1, F2, but we never really dive into what the role and the responsibility of that player is. Right, so if you're a coach and you break it down to a player and you like forget about using that terminology, you just say the first player, right? So the first player into the zone, he needs to hunt the puck, right? Like that's his number one priority. So if you're the second guy into the zone, your priority has to be, okay, well, you have one guy hunting the puck, you're probably seeking out his option. Like where's his out, right? So you're probably thinking, okay, so that's his D partner. Like you're seeking out his D partner because he wants to go D to D, he wants to reverse it, whatever the case may be. That's your job. Then the third guy, you're like the wait and see guy. You're the react guy. If it's a hard rim, you know that your defenseman's probably going to pinch, so you need to support him. If the puck gets bumped into the middle of the ice, you know you probably need to latch on to the centerman and try and force a turnover. So when you can find a way with young players to actually break it down to what's the tangible responsibility, not just like a narrative driven thing, guys will understand it a little better.
It's unfortunate because I wish that those types of things would have been taught at a much earlier age, like even for Rio too, right? And we've had to sit down together and say, okay, well, here's the situation, and I would show him his games. He hated watching his own games, just like everybody else, right? They don't like making mistakes.
It's not, listen, like when it comes to watching your games, like I would do it all the time, and it almost felt like I wanted to watch them just to make sure I played okay, which is not necessarily the right mindset to have. You want to watch it head on, you want to see exactly what you did, and you want to hopefully correct it or whatever the case may be. Like I do the same thing now with my TV work. There's a lot of stuff where, you know, I'll ask the producer to send me the video of it and watch it the next day and say, okay, did I look at the camera properly? Did I articulate myself properly? Was there any big pauses? The work doesn't really stop. It's the same, even though, you know, it's not necessarily playing the game anymore. It's talking about the game. But if you can kind of accept the fact that when you watch your shifts, you're probably not going to love everything you see, but it's okay because every single player playing the game would feel the exact same way about watching their shifts over.
And growing up, like you I mean, I'm sure you watched a ton of games, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
loved watching hockey growing up.
Yeah, I think now it's becoming. I mean, I ask a lot of the athletes that I work with here, hey, did you watch last night's game, or did you watch this play? And they're like, no, I didn't have time, right? Because they're just so busy these days. So
they're busy, right? Like, yeah, they got school work.
School.
I mean, they got extracurricular stuff. So I loved watching hockey. I played with a lot of guys who didn't necessarily like watching hockey, even though we played hockey. And that's understandable too, because, if you're at the rink from 8 till 1 and all you're thinking about, all you're doing is hockey, I can understand if you want to go home and watch some Netflix or get your mind off the game. But for me, I always kind of found myself watching games at night anyways.
The other question that I have for you is, like, I mean, obviously, like, you've done a lot of different things in life, right? Like, you've played like different sports.
I
got
played
different interests.
all different sports. Yeah, I like playing the guitar. Love playing every sport growing up.
How did you get started playing the guitar anyway?
You know what? I think it was the 04-05 lockout, and there was no hockey on TV. And I just kind of said I need something to do. So luckily enough, my parents were nice enough to sign me up for guitar lessons, and I enjoy it. I still play today.
And what other sports did you play growing up?
Everything. Like golf was definitely my second favorite sport. It might even be my favorite sport now that I'm not playing hockey anymore. Played soccer as a kid. Played some baseball. Played when it comes to school sports, played volleyball, basketball. Did all the track and field, cross country. So any sport, I was there and I was playing as a kid.
And that's the big debate right now, especially in youth hockey, right? Is whether I put my kid in other sports or not, or make him a single sport.
Like, that's not even a debate. That shouldn't even be a conversation. Your kid should not be playing one sport all year long. I think it's ludicrous. It's crazy. And we just saw Phil Kessel play 1,000 straight games. Someone asked me about this. I don't think we're going to see someone do that ever again. And I think these younger players to even get to 1,000 games is going to be really tough with the amount that they're skating and the toll it's going to take on their hips and groins. And you think about it now, you go do a 16-week training program in the summer where you're skating almost every day, and once you get a little better or a little older at hockey, then you're going to be doing development camps with your NHL team, rookie camps, midsummer, World Junior, all these kinds of things. They're taking a toll on guys, and we're seeing it so much now where guys are just having lingering groin and hip issues, myself included.
Yeah, because I remember you've been kind of in and out, getting it looked at, and yeah.
That was the thing that shut me down. It's my hip, and so I could tell you from 2017 until 2022, and it was all on the left side of my body. I had a high ankle sprain that was a grade 3 high ankle sprain. I did my ACL, MCL, had a quadriceps tendon tear in my knee after that, and then had hip issues in my psoas. And so it's not necessarily easy stuff, and when it starts piling up on you, especially on one side of the body, it becomes hard to overcome.
I almost started calling you Dr. Corrado because you just knew everything about it, right?
Well, it's crazy, right? Because you're seeing certain specialists and doctors, and you're getting treatment and all this stuff, and now you're talking their lingo a little bit. You don't know the theory of it, but you understand what they're saying. So it's I wish I knew less about that kind of stuff. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be a specialist in those types of things.
No,
for sure.
You don't want to be the guy that's on the massage table too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that you and I talked about when you were here is that even with some of the cognitive stuff that we were doing, you actually saw some changes in your golf game, because I remember you saying like you could actually see the club head making contact with the ball, right?
It was the putting for me.
Oh yeah, with putting, yeah.
Like even now, I'm a pretty decent golfer for an amateur golfer, but my putting is not superb by any means. And when we were working together, it just felt like I was seeing the line a little more. I was judging the speed much better, and I had a stretch there where I was making a lot of putts. And I think I told you that. I'm like, man, I'm really seeing the line now. I'm not used to this. I mean, how could you not, right? Like when you're working your brain and exercising it the way we did, it feels like everything around you just kind of slows down, and that included golf. And, so it's not just a hockey thing. I think it's just, it's a healthy brain in general that you can apply to many other things, and sports and work and school are all included into that.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part. So, I mean, obviously, like I've branched off to other sports as well. And so we've got, clients that are kind of in the car racing, field, or they're in pro badminton, got baseball, basketball, soccer, and Olympic fencing as well. So Gabriella Page is she's been doing amazing. So it really does spill over into those other sports, because I think it's really a life skill to be able to make these quick, decisions, right?
Yeah, totally. And you know what? If we can get back into the dojo, I'm sure I could use some sessions to help me with some of my TV and radio stuff. It's just crazy that now that I'm working like a working stiff, I'm way busier than I ever was when I was playing hockey, which is crazy to think, because I thought my days were really, really busy back then.
You're watching games now like a little bit differently too, right?
Yeah, like if I'm working the game, I definitely take some notes down and stuff. But even just to kind of keep track of what's going on and making sure, especially watching the Canadian teams play, and there's nights where I'll do Sports Center where we're going to be talking about 4 NHL games that night, and so we'll kind of sit up in a room at the studio and watch all the games at the same time, and kind of trying to make notes, trying to formulate what we're going to talk about. So it's quite exhausting, not gonna lie.
It must be, yeah.
It's awesome. We're watching hockey, we're talking hockey, and we're thinking about how we can communicate things to the viewer. So it's pretty cool.
So you guys are literally watching 4 games?
Yeah, so we're sitting in a boardroom, me and my producer, and we have all the games on the TVs, and we're watching them. Like there's some games that maybe have a little more priority than others, but at the end of the night, we'll sit there, and the host may ask me, a question or two about 4 of those games that we watched tonight.
Are you doing anything with the World Juniors as well?
No World Junior stuff. So for me right now, my work slate is do some Leafs radio. I'll do the pregame shows, the intermissions, and the postgame shows on TSN 1050. Doing some NHL panels between the Habs, the Sens, and the Jets, and those are all regional broadcasts on TSN. Doing Sports Center with Jay Onright and whoever's behind the Sports Center desk on any given night, and then doing some Overdrive fill-in stuff as well. And then in January, we'll start up with the Canadian Hockey League on TSN. So it's busy, and it's fun.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Buddy.
I think a lot of the stuff that we worked on, and obviously, like I said, it's changed over the last couple of years now, and we're looking to expand, and we're doing a lot of certification training as well for other trainers to expand this project that we're working on. To your point, my goal is to really get it into the hands of as many people as possible, and that it's not just about me, kind of doing this. And I think it's interesting that you bring up this whole idea about multi-sport, multi-discipline, and really knowing that a lot of the stuff that we're working on and we're developing here is going to apply in other parts of your life. And I think that's kind of the goal with what I want to do here. It's a life skill as opposed to just hockey, right?
It is a life skill, and I think that's what people get so wrapped up in hockey, and they think they got to move their kid a million miles away to play in Toronto. It's all nonsense. It's all ridiculous. And I put it to people this way. I think I said it to you all the time. Like, I played with Leo Komarov in Toronto. The season opener, they announce where you're from, right? Like the home opener. They say Frankie Corrado from Toronto, Ontario. And they announced Leo Komarov, and they said Northern Estonia. I had no idea where Northern Estonia is, so I looked at it on a map. It's just north of Latvia. It's near Russia. I'd never heard of the country before. And I thought to myself, if they can find Leo Komarov in Northern Estonia, they can find your kid when your kid's not playing in the GTHL. Like, you know what I mean? I understand people want to give their kid a great opportunity and play with a great team. All that stuff is all cool. That's awesome. I think that's great. As parents, you make a sacrifice for your kids in order to give them a great opportunity. There's nothing wrong with that. But, if you're of the mindset where you think your kid has to play, let's just say, in the GTHL, or else they're not going to make it, like, you're sadly mistaken. Like, if your kid is good enough, they will find your kid. And playing 2 sports or 3 sports is way, way better than playing 1 sport. I can tell you that. Like, as a kid, it never felt like there was any kind of injuries other than, if you fell off your bike, broke your elbow or something, or broke your finger. And then when you turn pro, and all you do all winter is just play hockey and then go home and sit on the couch, it's like, oh man, my back hurts now, my hip hurts now. So, the more active you can keep your kids and doing other stuff, the better it's going to be for them in the long term.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think a lot of the stuff that I've developed here for this program is I relate it back to the times I used to play Nintendo or, spend 8 hours in an arcade downtown. playing games,
Yeah.
right? And now, fast forward to today, a lot of the drills that we're doing is very close to it. Now we have the ability to track data and see what their improvements are and how it translate to the game. And I was a defenseman growing up as well, and I remember that a lot of the skills to because I was a small 145-pound defenseman.
Feisty though.
Right? Yeah, but I was dirty, and I would do these Scott Stevens type hits and stuff. But I learned a lot about timing from playing Mario Brothers or Super Mario Brothers, right? How fast do I need to be going to get to that guy, certainly within a certain period of time. But obviously now we're just digitizing everything and making it a little bit more interesting, right?
Video games get a bad rep for sure, but there's definitely benefits to be had there. I know when you had me using one of the apps, I would kind of use it before games to just kind of get everything turned on. It would just be a couple minutes, and I would play one of the games, and I would go to the rink feeling like, okay, I had switched my brain on. I'm kind of in this hockey mode now. So there's definitely a lot of benefit to it if it's the right ones, and it kind of it hits you the right way.
I really wanted to thank you for coming on today, Frankie, because I know that we've been good friends for a number of years now, and definitely you're certainly welcome to come back. And there's lots has changed. So
I know I got to get into the dojo. You got to hold me to it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon on the Cognition Podcast.